Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today, we're definitely going to be showing up some stories about rising from rising from life. As we were talking about in the green room, it's a friend from South, what I call South Brooklyn, which is actually Philadelphia, right? We all have the same mentality. So I can't wait to bring on my friend Kevin. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing excellent. I'm so excited to be on your platform. Looking forward to having this conversation and discussing my message in my book, Can't Break Me.
Yep, can't wait to hear about it. So why don't you just start introducing yourself? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Kevin Kayr Robinson. I grew up in Philadelphia with six siblings, and my mother, single mother, raised us all on welfare. I moved about 18 times before I turned 18. So I got a sense of uncertainty, a sense of living without a margin of safety. And so I had to grow up pretty fast and learn how to navigate the world. And so my life was very tough. And then eventually I turned around my life and was able to go on the straight and narrow path and create opportunities to become a multimillionaire today, where I own over 160 rental units. And my book, Can't Break Me, actually outlines my entire journey, how I went from pretty much being a knucklehead to improving my life and those around me, and primarily using that education and everything to go into the real estate space.
Yeah, well, we've all been knuckleheads, right? I mean, I think that's part of the journey that we take is, especially when you have come from a situation like you did, right? Uh, knucklehead. It was probably a lot of those things might not have been knucklehead stuff. It was just how do I cope? And so how did you cope? So just dive there a little bit.
So I can give you even more color. I remember in between fourth grade and eighth grade, I used to smoke marijuana, cigarettes,
Hmm.
skip school, drinking, because I was upset about our life. We were just always moving around. So I remember in eighth grade, I had three B's and three D's and one C because I'm cute, no A's, and I skipped school primarily. And we were living in a studio apartment on Fifth and Caesars B. Moore, which was a few blocks from Temple University. We had a hot plate, no stove, a bathroom sheet, no bathroom door. We had a bathtub and we had no shower. And we had 15 people competing for space with rats, roaches, and flies. And I remember my stepdad at the time, I call him Father Charles in the book, and he had said, don't be an F up like me and everybody in the family. Because the reason it was so crowded was a bunch of my siblings had got pregnant as teenagers, 14, 15, 16, back to back. And on top of that, I don't know why the baby dads were living with us, but that's another story for another day. But he said, do as I say, don't do as I do. And at that
Mm.
moment, I can see the hopelessness in his eyes and the tiredness that he wanted me to do more. And so, therefore, I embrace what I talk about in the book, the three D's: discipline, desire, and determination, which helped me transform my life. And then I graduated valedictorian, school president, debate captain, class president, track captain, cross country from high school. So I went from being at the bottom of the class in at eighth grade to being the top of the class and won a scholarship. So it all started back then.
Well, as you can imagine, I want to dive into that a little bit more, and I'd love to dive into those D's because
Yes,
obviously I have a little favoritism on the letters D.
makes sense.
Yeah. So why don't you explain to us a little bit more about your three D's?
Oh yeah. So what happened is the first thing was I realized that I wanted to get out of that situation, and so it wasn't like everything magically clicked for me. It wasn't a moment. It was more of a series of small realizations where I had to ask myself tough questions, and I had to come to terms with the reality that nobody was coming to save me. That there was no blueprint. That if I wanted to change my life, it was going to be because I changed. And so the first thing I did is I embraced this idea of desire. Desire is what motivates you every day to get up and want more for your life, to change your life.
Mhm.
But what I realized is that desire alone doesn't get you results. And so I had to embrace discipline. And discipline is when you adopt routines and you actually do what you say you're going to do. And then I had to embrace determination. And determination is what carries you through when you face setbacks, when it's much easier to quit or give up. And so I became vulnerable. And then I came up with my own personal board of directors, mentors, and sponsors who can teach me stuff that I could not learn at home. So I have found a mentor to teach me about discipline, Teach me about graduating from high school. Teach me about getting to college. Teach me about being a productive citizen of the world. And so I knew that at home I had people that loved me, but they were inconsistent or they were struggling. So I went out there and found mentors and sponsors and start collecting them the same way people collect baseball cards or Pokemon cards. I took that approach. And that's how I was able to transform my life. I did a 180. And then I start realizing, okay, at that moment when my stepdad was talking to me, Father Charles, I took the perfect from an imperfect person. So I didn't judge him overall because of his flaws. I said, what is the good thing here that I can take and run with?
Well, and it sounds like the good thing that you take out that you had the foundation at home might not have been some of those other pieces, but that love, right? So,
Yes.
your family, they knew that, like, and Father Charles knew this is not the situation. It's not a chosen, it was chosen in a way for the way the choices he made, but not the choices he wanted you to make.
Yeah.
And I'll add another D for it. You had the drive, you had the determination and the drive to see those things and to hear those, right? Not every kid really hears those messages. And there's a lot of people I'm sure that you grew up with and I grew up with as well who didn't have it, didn't have
Mm-hmm.
that piece to how do you push yourself a little
Yeah.
bit further. So
And it's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that because it's so hard for us, a lot of us, especially when you come from an under-resourced community and you have very limited resources and limited education. You see these people who are struggling. They have a good heart. So I said my family will feed my belly and feed my soul, but they could not teach me certain things. And so
mm,
sometimes we see them and we say, why would I believe you? You're a failure. You've never done anything. You can't even keep a job. Look at the way we live. Why would I trust anything you say? And
mhm.
my idea was like, hey, look, let me just take a chance because what I've been doing for the past 13 years is not working. So let me just take a chance to see if I can get the hell out of here because I don't want to be stuck in this vicious cycle of poverty.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's that vision that again, Father Charles didn't give you a vision. He was like, the only vision he got you is this is not where you want to be, or I don't want that for you, which is really powerful for somebody who's not your biological father, right?
Yes,
That just saying, hey, I don't want this for you. He could have very easily, as other people do in life, not my problem, right?
exactly.
What, and give him that some of that credit, but give you a lot of that credit also by hearing that message. Kids don't always hear those messages that adults
Mm,
give us, man. I talk about a message that I got when I was 18, how life goes by so quickly, try to appreciate it. And I'm like, that guy's 60. What does he know? What does he
mm,
know, man? I'm 57 now. Man, I'm talking about it today. I talk about it all the time. I don't
yes.
know where that gentleman is right now, but I can tell you, yeah, it goes by in the blink of an eye. So you took that determination and you started building yourself. As you said, your high school career was one of Marvel, one of where you accumulated a lot of successes to build,
Yes,
but it was also building the right. It wasn't just your drive. You chose to build the right community,
yes,
the right mentors. Ask those
yes.
questions. How did you know to ask the questions that needed to be asked?
So when I was in eighth grade, I started reading books because I realized my parents loved me a lot. They just were lacking a couple of things. So I went to go find a mentor or sponsor to teach me about
Mhm.
discipline. I also wanted to learn about like, okay, why weren't they good with their money management or things of that nature? So I started reading books about finance and CEOs and stuff. And what I learned was that they had their own board of directors, these companies that would advise the CEO, and they meet with them periodically. And I said, I need to think about myself like a company. And so that's how I came up with Kayr. But I also said I need to have a board of directors that I can check in on, that I can come to them and ask them questions about how I navigate this world that is so foreign and how I have these ambitious goals. And so I wanted to make sure I had personal board of directors, mentors, and sponsors, but also I changed my friends. I wanted to get into nurturing environments, communities where people pour into me and actually encourage me to be a better person, and they could see stuff in me that I cannot see in myself. So I changed my
Mm.
group of friends and I also became more vulnerable. I was willing to say, hey, look, I don't know all the answers. I remember I had a mentor, Damon Pace. I talk about him in the book, Can't Break Me. And we would go to a Chinese restaurant and he would say, get whatever you want. And I would say, can I get rent rice? And then he would say, what? I said, shrimp fried rice. And he said, do you mean shrimp fried rice? And I look at him and I said, yes, but you say it weird. And at that point, I knew that I needed help learning how to enunciate words. So I found a high school teacher, English teacher, who spent 1 hour a week with me to teach me how to enunciate words. And then when I went to Bowdoin College, I found a theater professor who spent 1 hour a week with me to help me learn how to enunciate words because I knew that I desired more for myself. And if I became disciplined, I knew that eventually I was going to achieve my ultimate goal, which was to go from, I talk about this in the book, from survival to structure to stability. Because
Mm.
when you're in the survival mode, you're always jumping around. You know where you're going to eat. You don't know if you have electricity. Everything is just, and you're hyper alert. But once we start having routines and systems and structure, then you're going to get to the outcome, which is stability financially, mentally, emotionally. So I signed up for counseling. So I start taking those baby steps to transform my life.
Yeah, and that's what it is, right? You know, creating that foundation, you learned that again, the love foundation, you didn't need to go look for anywhere. You knew you were supported in many ways, but it's the other structures that you needed to do. So how did you start structuring? It sounds like you decided to create this. Is it the same board of advisors or the that you had
Personal board of
then?
directors.
Yeah,
Yep.
the board of directors. Have you used the same ones throughout your life, or have
Throughout,
you?
yes, I've been in touch with the same people throughout my life. So since I was like in ninth grade, I first used teachers and used counselors and principals and pastors, and the board of directors would just get bigger and larger depending on how big my goals were for life. And so initially, it would start with, okay, these are things I need. I need to learn the fundamentals, just learn how to be disciplined, how to show up on time, learn how to write, learn how to do math, learn how to enunciate things, learn how to fill out a college application. So therefore, I joined organizations like Philadelphia Futures, which is Heights Philadelphia now, and they used to give us two tokens: one so you can get there, and one to reimburse you for one reimbursing you because you got there, and one to come back. And we used to be able to sit there and eat snacks, and they had stayed open late. So therefore, if you went home and you didn't have electricity, at least you got all your homework done and you had something to eat. So it's a place that was nurturing that I felt as though I can use that to elevate my life. And so for me, I started collecting the mentors and sponsors early on. And as my life became more sophisticated, I got more sophisticated mentorship and sponsors. But I was always willing to open my mouth and ask for help because I believe a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And of course, I was really vulnerable because sometimes mentor would say, "Hey, you want to get something to eat?" And I would say, "No, I need a winter coat. I'm cold," or "I need to get this or that. I'm struggling." And so that started opening doors for me.
Well, that's really powerful. You know, a lot of people, you know, especially men, will say, I mean, with mental wellness, right? Man, I can't talk about it. I can't this. I can't that. Right? You know, you got to kick the can'ts down the road.
Yes.
And but it really goes back to when you speak up for yourself, you're going to learn, and you're going to learn who you can trust. Right? Not
Yep.
everybody out there that you're going to tell. And I'm sure when you've made your board of directors, some of those people at the beginning you might have given the trust, but they didn't earn it, and now you get to fine tune the board of directors.
You're 100% correct. And so that's the thing, excuse me, is that you're trying to be mindful and keep all that in consideration. You're like, look, I'm going to go look for people who I think we share the same values and we have kindred spirits. So they have my best interest in mind and they're good people. And so you do it step by step. You don't just give all your business away, but you're going into places that you think care about you, whether that is your local church or whether that's your local religious organization or that's your local school, or just a relative that seems as though, hey, look, they're good people, they care about people, and you share a little bit and say, okay, let's see if the advice they gave me helped me become a better person, how to deal with grief, how to deal with identity, how to budget. And so that's how I started to become more wise about how I approach life.
Well, 100%. And going through those things, you eventually. So again, high school is where you started to turn it on, but that was just the beginning. That was your rocket launch. You know,
Yes, yes.
tell us a little bit more about how you then turned it into some of that structure, which is that next phase of your life.
And so what I did is I went out and I will find people to help me get to the next level. So one, I wanted to find people help me graduate from high school because my autograph book, one of my classmates wrote, "I can't believe you made it," because several of my siblings got pregnant at a very young age and also dropped out of school. So, and I was smoking a lot of weed and skipping a lot of school. So they thought I was going to end up the same way. And so I did a 180. So the first thing I said is, okay, let me get people to help me learn how to become disciplined, how to become an intellect, how to become a good athlete. So I made I put forth a concerted effort to build that relationship with the coaches at University High School. And then I said, all right, let me get into these college prep programs that would expose me to college programs and how to write the essay and things like that. And then I had a mentor who taught me about prepared me for my SATs. And I asked him, I said, David Kirsch, what are you going to do? He said, he was at Wharton, he was a junior, and I was a high school student. He said, I'm going to become an investment banking like my dad. I said, what's investment banking? So he gave me told me what investment banking was. And I said, I want to do that. That sounds pretty cool to me. I never heard that before. And so then I start talking to him and say, what do I need to break into Wall Street? Because I don't know, my parents didn't work on Wall Street, and you said your dad did it and you had an internship. And so I decided, okay, I needed to go to Bowdoin College and do extremely well academically, but I needed to get an internship every summer. So my freshman year, I got an internship at American Express. My second year, I got an internship at Prudential Securities doing sales and trading. And I also did the Tuck Bridge program at Dartmouth. And then my junior year, I did investment banking at the Credit Suisse and the technology group, and I got an offer. So I started putting together the structure that I realized, okay, what books do I need to read? Who do I need to talk to prepare for these internships? How do I get to Bowdoin College and navigate it so I can do well academically and do well socially? So I start putting the pieces, the blocks in place. And that's how I was able to supercharge my success.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love that you mentioned Brooklyn College because one of the, I remember when I was going to Brooklyn College that they used to call that the public education Harvard. You can get so
Okay.
much, right? Yeah, I remember that was one of their catchphrases. And I had a great uncle who I always respected who went there and was an alumni. And, you learn, and it's about seeking the right knowledge. It doesn't matter about going to the Ivy Leagues or anything like that, but you found mentors
Yes, yes.
who were
I did go Ivy League, so don't start a fight here.
yeah, no fight, right?
No, I went to Dartmouth. It's
Yeah,
like
no,
still
but
business.
but
I'm just
but
joking,
but
but
it, but
you're
it's
right. It's about going to these institutions, regardless of how it's set up, and connecting with the right people and getting the knowledge. So I talk about in
right.
my book, the three C's. I talk about intellectual capital, whether you're learning in the classroom or outside the classroom. I talk about social capital, the relationships you're building so you can leverage change and affect change in your life or in others, and financial capital. How do we access money? How do we grow money? How do we budget things? How do we start businesses? So you're very, very on point when you talk about you have to make sure that you're taking them, getting the most out of your experiences in these institutions.
Right, and that's what I wanted to say. Is it you don't have while it helps you, right? It's against those different connections that eventually happen. It's you don't have to go to the
A
Harvards and
fancy
the Yale,
school,
right?
yes.
Look, it helps. Don't get me wrong. Again, when
Mm,
I was in corporate America, I knew who I was working with,
mm,
people, and but there's a way to do that also by just coming up, pulling your bootstrings. There is a little bit of that is
absolutely.
accurate, but you have to have that determination and things like that because we talk about habits.
Yes, yes,
That's so important. It's your daily disciplines, right?
yes.
How can why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how that can accelerate your life or help you create some of that structure?
And so for me, early on, I realized that success does not like speed. So I embraced this idea that things done well are done soon enough. And so the first thing I had to do is say, all right, I got to stop getting D's on my report card. That's the first thing.
Mm,
And now I got to get some of these C's and try to at least get an A. So I got to start applying myself. But I definitely need to make sure that I'm not missing school as much as I was, like 80, 90% of the school day in middle school throughout the year. So I said, let me show up the class every day and let me show up on time and let me turn every assignment in. That's the bare minimum. So I believe if you do what's necessary, then do what's possible, you find yourself doing the impossible. So
mm,
the first thing is because I was all the way at the bottom in eighth grade, I had said I gotta basically master the basics And then I'm going to ask for help. I need tutoring. I'm going to ask people, hey, can you help me figure out how to enunciate words? Can you teach me how to present words? What does it take to get into one of the top colleges? What programs, after school programs? So I start doing what's necessary. Then I did what's possible, and I found myself doing the impossible, graduating valedictorian. And so that formula worked those 4 years in high school. I applied the same 4 years, the same approach the next 4 years when I went to Bowdoin College. I said, who's going to be my personal board of directors on campus? What is going to be my nurture environment? Who are going to be my friends? How do I stand out so I can get the best GPA and get the most internships so that when I start off with everybody, we're all at the same level as first year students, but where am I going to end up in my 4th year? So I got a job at Goldman Sachs because I was stacking the odds in my favor. And
Right.
so I think it's so important that you do the basic stuff. For instance, every day, brush your teeth at least twice a day, in the morning and night, and make sure you floss. So you're doing the basic things so you can maintain your health. Make sure you're drinking water. Make sure you're doing the basics. And then if you do a little bit more, you're going to find yourself doing the impossible. So that's what I approach that same, I use that same approach for physical things, health, mentally, spiritually, everything. And so for me, that has worked. Keep it simple and keep moving no matter what.
Yeah, and you said throughout your college, right? When we started talking about college, you were interning every year, and you
Yes.
weren't interning at, Bob's Big Boy. Not that there's anything wrong with Bob's Big Boy, but you were stepping up the level of who you were working, and when you ended, Goldman Sachs, right? That's one of the premier companies in
Yes.
the
Yes.
world. It's not
Yes.
just like, oh, I never heard of that.
Yes.
You
Yes.
and you knew where you wanted. You kept that focus. You kept that vision.
Yes. Yep. And it's the same thing like with this book, Can't Break Me. Like it's my first time ever writing a book. But I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to come up with a routine. I'm going to apply myself and I'm going to do everything in my power. First, I do what's necessary. You just got to write the book, make sure you put everything in there. But then I said, I want to spend a lot of hours thinking about interviewing people, writing back and forth, getting drafts, getting feedback. And then I said, I want to figure out how do I get the word out? And then when it came out on March 12th, 2026, it was a USA Today bestseller the first week. And then it was also a USA Today bestseller the second week. So it was consecutively. And so my publisher called me. He said, this is unheard of if you're not like a celebrity or what have you. But the thing is that I was focused. If you do what's necessary, then you do what's possible, you find yourself doing the impossible. So that's always been my approach to everything I've ever done since the 8th grade. Prior to the 8th grade, don't hold me. I was just acting crazy. So I
Yep.
can't be saying I've been doing this out of the womb.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. And that's one of the things. I mean, that's why when you beat yourself up on being a knucklehead, man, you were well, you're 12, man. At
I
12,
know.
but at 12, man, if you're gonna judge me on my 12, man, I
But
gotta
the
tell you, I'm old enough that if you judge me on when I was 32, I'm still not the guy who I was. We
yes,
grow,
yes,
we
we
keep
do
growing and
grow.
fine tuning, and,
Yes,
and and that's
yes.
part of that package.
And
So
what one thing I want to mention, but I didn't mean to cut you
yeah, go
off, is
ahead.
that the book I call it Can't Break Me because when I turned my life around, I got that scholarship. I won that scholarship to go to Bowdoin College, a presidential scholarship. And my brother, 1 year my junior, was sentenced 12 to 20 years for attempted murder. And he served his time. And as of writing this book, he's back in the system. And when I was a junior in college, what was really sad is that I told my mother that we got this offer. And so I had told her we were about to be rich and I was really excited and everything. And she said, KR, not right now. And you got to come home. And we had to come home because the father of my sister's children shot her 5 times in the face and put a hit out on our family. And God willing, I went home and we went in hiding. It was on national news. And what happened is that after he killed the taxi driver and my sister, he turned himself in at a jail, at a prison, not at a church. And then we were able to move forward. But his daughter, my sister's daughter as well, had said, "Don't be strong for me, be strong for our family." So at that moment, it was a defining moment. Am I going to let that moment break me, or am I going to build something better? And so that's why I say stay unbreakable. So I went back the following week, had interviews and did really well. Went to Bowdoin College, got all A's except for one A minus, and got the President Award for uncommon contribution to the community and academic excellence. And then I went to Goldman Sachs. So I just mentioned that to stress that it's not always a beautiful story. You got to be willing to go through it to get to the end.
Yeah, and well, for you, it's keeping that focus. So that's what I'm hearing. Not everybody could keep that focus. Let's be honest, right? We get distractions, but
Yes,
like for me, I've gotten distractions. I've been a knucklehead. But when I'm focused, nobody stops me. You
that's
know,
amazing.
I mean that's why, like with this podcast, Listen Notes has me in the top 1%. I'm like,
Wow.
man, once a couple of weeks ago when I had this heart scare and they were like, sit down. I'm like, all right, so sit down doesn't mean to me, let me go watch
Mm,
TV. I haven't watched TV. My TV's on sometimes, but I'm doing podcasts. I'm writing books.
wow.
I'm doing exactly what I say I do.
Wow.
What would be some of the things that you would suggest for people who sometimes get distracted? Because most people are not as focused as you are.
Yeah, yeah. I think what happens is most of us, we're overly ambitious. We underestimate how much time it would take to do 100 things, and we overestimate exactly how much time it would take to do 4 important things every day. So I always tell people, just come up in the morning or write it down the night before. 3 to 4 things that you want to
Yep,
accomplish the next
I
day,
love
and
that.
everything else is
Yep,
ice on the cake.
yep.
Like if that meant today I got to do this podcast with you, that's 1 to 4. I only got 3 more. If I say I'm going to clean my kitchen, I got 2. I got 2 more
Yep.
left after that. And maybe just I got to make sure I go to work. But you want to simplify it. Don't overcomplicate it and say, what's the 3 or 4 things I'm going to do every day that's so important that is going to move the needle? And if I do everything else, I can get my 4 things done by 3 o'clock. I'm okay. I can do extra, but at least I did my 3 to 4 things. Just simplify it. Don't make it complicated. You got a
I,
whole lot of things to do today, but what's the 3 or 4 most important things that you have to get done?
I agree because I always go no more than three. That doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can't do more. Now, so okay, I know there's a lot of people who have different beliefs. I always say eat the frog first. Like one of the things in the morning, while you might say brush your teeth, yes, brush your teeth, but that's not one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to pick something that you can complete in that day, but that it might be a little harder, right? Doing that thing
Mm-hmm.
that you don't want to do, man, I don't want to do
It,
what.
it has to be something that's going to move the needle.
Okay, yep.
That's the threshold. It's going to move the needle.
Mhm.
Like today, you may not brush your teeth, but you got to make sure you do something that's going to move the needle. So this podcast is something that's going to move the needle,
Right.
or something. I got to make sure I pay my property taxes. That's going to move the needle. So you want to make sure it's three. You said 3, I say 4, but we can say 3. 3 things
Right.
that's going to move the needle,
Right.
and
It's
then you can go to sleep and say, I did the most important thing I was supposed to do today.
yep.
Everything else I can take care of tomorrow, and let that stress take care of itself. But I took care of the most important things. If I was supposed to submit my application for a job or write a draft of this book, I did what I was supposed to do. Everything else is extra. What happens is that we get overwhelmed and we become too ambitious. I also tell people when they first want to get into working out, don't say you're going to work out 5 times a week, just or 7 times a week. Just say 2 or 3 at max.
Right.
And then after a couple months, you can build it up, but just keep it to the minimum. Or you say you're going to go for a walk. Just say you're going to do 2 walks a day, maybe 10 minutes at a time. Because I want you to figure it out. I want you to ease into it. And then you're able to even do more.
So speaking about easing into it, you had a career at Goldman Sachs, but you also then eased into real estate investing.
Yep.
How would you suggest for young people or even older people to try to ease into something like that? That's very, daunting.
Yes. So the way I did it, actually, a lot of people were saying, KR, why are you going so slow? So I owned 1 rental unit in 2009. By 2018, I had 9. So it took me 9 years to get to 9 rental units. So to get to 9 houses. A lot of my friends say, "Hey, you're smart. You're handsome. You're supposed to be smart. I don't know why it's taking so long." But I would tell people, I want you to run your own race at your own pace. Run your own
Mm,
race at your own pace. So in 2009, I had 1. 2018, I got to 9. 2019, I got the 35 rental units. So I tripled the size of my portfolio. 2020, I got to 105. So I bought 70 rental units during the pandemic. like a 24 unit apartment building, 14 unit apartment building, some 12 units. What I initially started is I kept my 9 to 5 job so I could live off of that, pay for all my bills, vacation, healthcare, all that stuff. And I would save the rental income that will come from the cash flows that will come from that rental property. I would save all of that because when you buy real estate for the long term, you benefit 4 ways. One, you have cash flows, which is the money you get after you pay your property manager, pay your mortgage and everything. So you get the cash flows. Number two, you get tax benefits, depreciation, you get the right stuff off. So I took advantage of that. Number three, you're going to get debt pay down. So you're paying down the debt. So therefore, it's more equity in the property. And the last one is appreciation, which can be forced and natural appreciation. When you fix it up, it goes up and with inflation. So for the first 9 years, I didn't touch any of that real estate money or equity. Then year 10, I can borrow against the properties. And I also can use the cash reserves to start buying apartment buildings. So what I did is I bought everything in the beginning in my personal name because there are a number of benefits versus an LLC. And your personal name, you can take advantage of programs like NACA, FHA, where you can put down 3.5%. If you're a medical professional, healthcare professional, or law enforcement, depending on the city, you can get programs where you put 0% down. So I took advantage of that. You also get down payment flexibility. That's the 0%, 5%, 10%. You also get a lower interest rate if you buy in your personal name versus an LLC. You also get to pay a lower insurance premium if you buy in your personal name versus in an LLC. And there's a slew of benefits. So that's why that was my path. Buying your personal name, learn the business. And I talk about this in the book, the 3 R's, which is you build a track record, then you build relationships. And now the third R is your reputation, which will precede you if you do the first two.
Yeah, well, that's 100%. I guess you have the whole alphabet on things like that. And I love that because you can remember it. I mean, that's where
Yes.
one of my talks is about the R's. When you're using the R's, finding the R in your heart about resilience, and I love the R's that you brought up as well. Because what you've done is you've built not only for yourself, but that kind of safety for your family. You've
Yes.
really pulled up the bootstrings, not for yourself, but also for your family. What does financial freedom look like? We all talk about it, right?
Yes.
We all want that, but you had a real vision of what that looked like for you. So what does that really look like right
Yep.
now?
Like for me, the idea was a lot of people talk about generational wealth, which I think is good, but generational wealth is more like a north to south concept where I buy a property now and then 40 years, my family can inherit the property and now I have generational wealth, which is a good thing. I said, what can I come up with something that's different? So I came up and I talk about it in my book. I coined the term transformational wealth, where I become really successful today. Transformational wealth is an east to south, east to west concept. I become really successful today so that when I go do a real estate deal, what have you, I can hire my brother who doesn't have a college diploma to be my real estate agent, a college degree, make him a real estate agent. So when I do $1 million deal, he gets a $30,000 commission, which is 3%. He was able to buy a house for him and his wife and 6 children. Now they live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and now they have some stability and they have structure. And then I'm able to hire his in-laws with landscaping. They used to be renters. Now they own a duplex and they have a tenant. I hire my aunt to help with cleaning. I hire my brother who helps with landscaping. He owns a house. So what we're doing is we're transforming people's lives today. And I start with my family, and then I can start helping friends and people who don't or aren't related to me. I have a bunch of people who aren't related to me. But the concept is first to make sure your family's secure, and then I can help other people. So that's what I think about financial freedom is the point where I can come home and they don't just have to look at me and say, we can't wait till you die so we can get our generational wealth. Instead, they say, hey, my niece will call and say, I need $2,000. And I would say, it sounds like you need to go clean 10 of my apartments or a couple of houses so I can pay you for your work versus just handing you something for free. And so what I do is I like to meet people where they are. And my financial freedom has put me in a position to help not only family members, but other people in the world.
Yeah, I love that the transactional, but it's also the transformational,
Yes.
and that's what it is because you've changed everybody because you're also educating them. It's not like because you hear that all the time. KR man, you got lucky. You didn't
Yep.
get
Yep.
lucky, right?
I got discipline. That's what I tell people.
Right, and it all looks good, right? On the outside, you could show all the pictures and all the glam, but nobody sees the the work that you did.
Yes,
You know, that
yes,
that's why I'm like, sometimes I do a lot of work. I go, you can't wait to see what I'm doing. And then once I put it out there, they're like, man, you work? I'm like, yeah, what do you think? You know, because a lot of people
yes.
judge us on the way that they act. And
That
they're
is
like,
so
ah, man,
true.
you're really doing it. You know, all these
Yes,
people are like, I got this, I got that. I'm like, I'm not telling you what I got. I'm showing you what I can
yep,
do. And that's what I've
yep.
always done. You know, where I didn't go to Ivy Leagues and things like that. But guess what? I worked at, one of the top law firms in the world. And I was,
Wow.
I ran some stuff. I worked at the end of my career. I worked at Pfizer. I could go into the
Wow.
CEO's office if I needed to, and not be like, oh, I don't belong here. I
Yes,
would, I was in legal. I'm not a lawyer, but I'd walk into the general counsel regularly and had conversations with him.
yes,
I didn't belong. I knew I belonged in the
yes,
conversations that I can carry through. That's a confidence. And
yes.
how can you, what would be something that you would love to suggest to people, or you've taught your family, or others, how to find that confidence?
And
Because,
so I'm glad you mentioned that because motivation can be taught, discipline can be taught. And I was a traditional introvert before I switched around. And I had realized I said I had to speak up for myself. I had to become my own advocate. I can't just, I grew up in a neighborhood where the guys keep everything in. You're quiet. You're trying to be a street guy. You just nod your head like, yo, I'm good. And so I had to break out of that mentality. So I would tell someone in order to do something that you've never done, you have to become someone you've never been. And
mm,
so you start to go and sort out mentors and sponsors and people who you admire and say, hey, look, I don't have to learn everything on my own. I want to learn from your experience. So I will go and sign up for a public speaking course. I will go sign up for an acting course. I will go and spend time with a mentor, someone that's an elder, someone that's more experienced like you, and say, how do I start a podcast? How do I become successful enough that I can work at a Pfizer or work at a major law firm? What are the things, the soft skills and hard skills? Because I started to leverage other people's experience and knowledge and not be so high on myself that I think that I know everything.
yeah, well, I think that's the biggest part is you don't know anything. And if you're the smartest person in any room that you walk into, you're walking into the wrong rooms. I don't want to be the smartest person. I could be among the smartest, right? I could be
Mm-hmm.
a leader and teach people,
Yeah.
but I want to learn from somebody. And just because they don't know as much about one subject, I also recognize the fact that they know some other things. I mean, I've been in a lot of rooms where people ask me questions and then I ask them the question back and they're like, but I didn't have as much experience as you. I'm like, well, it's not. It's how you see things, right?
Yes.
It's our vision, finding our vision, because that's where a lot of people don't realize part of their stories, the power in their,
Mm-hmm.
practicing the pause and learning the things that we need to learn. We get stuck in so many different ways. What do you think is one way where discipline separates people who succeed and those who get stuck?
I think the thing is that discipline is actually doing what you say you're going to do and adopting routines. And so sometimes when we get stuck, it's not it's more or less because we're well, I think what happens is that every day I tell people they have to beat three people. One, you have to beat yourself. So that's self sabotage and that's also self doubt. So sometimes you're going to set yourself up for failure. You're like, oh, I can't make this. You're doubting yourself, but then you're also doing stuff to mess up your blessing. The other thing is going to be you have to beat the ref. And so that may be the system, that may be your coach, that may be someone calling the calls against you. So just get over that. You got to beat that. But then you also have to beat your opponent. Some people are out to get you. So be mindful of that. And so I would say what happened is that we're all up inside our head and that we're stuck on saying everything has to be perfect or everybody hates me or I dislike myself. Instead, what I would say is that you need to come up with a routine. You say, all right, these are the things how I feed my soul, how I sharpen my tools, and I go to work for a paycheck. I go to school for an education. I go to my loved ones for happiness and joy, and I don't mix them up. And so what happened is that we're all going to have those tough days, but we got to know where we're going to go for that source to help us get back in the game and just not get knocked down and say, oh, I'm stuck. I can't move. You're like, no, I have my routines. I have my team. I know exactly what's going to help me propel me to get to the next level.
Yep, and keep those routines, keep those habits. Now, okay, so the habits when you were 13, when you started this journey,
Yes.
different than the habits you're keeping today. How do we adjust and fine tune or recalibrate using an R? Um,
Well, what you do is that the habits haven't really changed. You keep the same framework, right?
mhm.
So when I approached, like how I said, when I was at University High School, I went into the place and I said, this is the things that I need to be successful. I need to make sure I have a personal board of directors for this stage of my life. I also need to make sure I have nurturing environments, whether that was the Philadelphia Futures program or a local church or a community that will pour into me. Make sure I have the right friends in this community so I'm successful, and also make sure that I understand the keys, which is like, all right, intellectual capital. It could be, let me figure out how to be successful in this space. And keep in mind the same things I had mentioned. You go to work for a paycheck, you go to school for education, you go to your friends for your loved ones for joy and happiness. So I would keep the core. And what I would do is when I went to college, when I went to Boatman College, I said, okay, closed mouth doesn't get fed, need to be vulnerable. What does it take to be successful in this place? I need nurture environments. I need my own personal board of directors. I need to make sure that I'm doing the steps that what this community, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So I had to figure out what does it mean to be successful in this new setting. And then when I went to Goldman Sachs, I used the same approach. So for me, I use the same framework, even though I'm using the same recipes, even though I may switch up the ingredients.
There you go. And as you went, right, you sometimes use better ingredients as you went up the chain,
Yes,
using
yes,
your metaphor. Sure.
yes.
As we get close to the end of the episode, I always have everybody walk into my magic garden. You've given us a lot of seeds that should grow. What is one more seed or one more piece of advice that you'd love to share?
And I think this is the most important thing. And I stress this in my book, Can't Break Me. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. So sometimes we get so stressed out about our past. Our past can explain who we are, but it does not get to define our future.
Yeah, that's so true. And so I'll just ask you a little bit about that question. In that, are we ever finished?
No, I don't think we're ever finished. What we're doing is we're constantly reinventing ourselves. So like before I was like, hey, I want to be a college high school student. I want to learn how to become a college student. I want to learn how to be an investment banker or a hedge fund guy. I want to learn how to be a real estate guy. I want to now learn how to be an author. Or you may have stages where you want to learn how to be a parent or you want to learn how to be a police officer. So it's just coming up with this idea that we're never finished and it's not where you start, is where you finish. So you want to keep moving forward.
Okay, but we are finished for this episode, and I'd love to have you on again to have that. How can people reach out to you?
Yes, so you could reach me at Kayr Motivates on social media. That's Kayr Motivates on social media. My website is kayrmotivates.com. So that's www.kayrmotivates.com. And you can contact me anytime. We are actually doing talks around the country. I'm speaking at various schools, whether that was Yale, Dartmouth. I'm all over the place. I look forward to hearing from you guys. My book is out, Can't Break Me. Please check it out.
For sure. That's all going to be in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for being you and leading not only your community but leading all of us on this journey today.
I appreciate being here. I look forward to staying in touch.
All right. And everybody else, I know you've gotten so much about this, today from today's episode. And I just want to make sure you always have that foundation of peace and love, right? That was exactly with KR, his love. He knew that in his life, that foundation of peace and love, or at least love, was definitely very firm in his life. And he also knew when he brought a bat, bringing those awesome thoughts, having that board of directors for himself. And he was definitely able to hit the sweet spot. Thank you so much and have a great day.